Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live broadcast of Teach Today Q&A, sponsored by the Tony Jennings Exceptional Education Institute, located at the University of Central Florida. We are broadcasting live over YouTube and Facebook. I'm your moderator, Dr. Deshawn Chapman. I am the Education Programs Manager of the Paramore Education and Innovation District in the Center for Higher Education Innovation at the University of Central Florida. Tonight's presentation is the third in our series of 5 broadcasts, which will focus on behavior management. That's our topic tonight. You can watch previous sessions on our YouTube channel or Facebook. And of course, you can always email us at tjeei@ucf.edu, and we'll be sure to connect you with our broadcast. If you have a question concerning tonight's topic, go ahead and type it into the comments on YouTube or Facebook, and we'll make every attempt to address it tonight. If we don't get to your question, we would definitely like to have an opportunity to get you an answer through email. So you can add your email to the chat or contact us at tjeei@ucf.edu. As we answer questions tonight, please be aware that the responses are the panelists' views and do not necessarily represent the views of the Tony Jennings Exceptional Education Institute. Now, I would like to introduce our panelists. Dr. Rebecca Hines is an associate professor and academic program coordinator of exceptional education at UCF. She teaches a doctoral course in special education technology and leads the undergraduate exceptional education program. Dr. Hines is co-host along with Dr. Lisa Deeker for a podcast called Practical Access. They take a fun and informal look at practical situations for teachers, parents, and people with disabilities. They discuss real-life problems and offer their best advice from both personal and professional experience. And we'll add the link to their podcast in our comments. Dr. Kelly Schaefer serves as the Associate Director for the Tony Jennings Exceptional Education Institute, Coordinator for Project ASD and the Graduate Certificate in ASD, and the coordinator for the Graduate Certificate in Applied Behavior Analysis at the University of Central Florida. For over 25 years, she's actively provided services to teachers' preparation in special education, applied behavior analysis, and autism spectrum disorders. She's committed to the provision of services with excellence that ultimately improve the quality of life for individuals with disabilities and their families. Next is Dr. Josh Pritchard. He has been in the field of behavior analysis since 2000 and has worked with a wide variety of populations with diverse behavioral issues and is currently working at UCF. His professional experience includes providing consultation services for a wide range of ages and populations and behavior acceleration and deceleration. His expertise is requested from around the globe to consult on setting up, refining, and maintaining behavior analytic centers for persons with autism and related disorders. So glad to have him here with us tonight. Next is Dr. Whitney Hanley, Assistant Professor of Special Education at the University of Northern Iowa. She completed her PhD in Exceptional Education in summer 2020 from the University of Central Florida. She's previously served in teaching roles for special and general education schools in Georgia and Kentucky prior to turning to higher education. She's focused on community-embedded action research to inform cross-system models for females with or at risk of emotional or behavior disorders who are served by education, child welfare, and juvenile justice systems. Welcome. Kara Astolfi is a 5th grade teacher with almost 20 years expertise in both special and general education. She's led school-wide PBIS initiatives as well as served at the district level as a coach. For the past 2 years, she's worked exclusively at focus schools, which are D schools. Since the pandemic, she's adjusted to teaching a hybrid class and is currently teaching face-to-face remotely. She's been recognized by the state of Florida as a high impact teacher. 3 different times and has served on the High Impact Teacher Corps during 2019-2020 school year. So welcome, panelists. Thank you all for sharing your evening with us. And as I stated previously, our topic tonight is behavior management. We have a few pre-submitted questions that we will begin with. And as I stated before, if anyone watching wants to submit a question, please feel free to drop it in the chat on Facebook or YouTube. So let's get to it, shall we? So for our first question, there has been an increase in discipline calls in the afternoon for kindergarten and first grade students. This may be because students are isolated to the desk for social distancing. Students don't have movement time, center time. They're not going to the teacher table, to break up their day. So students are getting stir crazy in the afternoon, bouncing around off the walls. Admin is getting called to remove students from destroying things, running around, displaying aggressive behavior toward other students and the teachers. Are you getting the picture here? So what are your suggestions? And anyone, feel free to jump in at any time.
Well, I will jump in first. Okay. And say that it's not surprising at all. And I am sure that everybody who's been a teacher can imagine this scenario right now. So I know we have some behaviorists on here, so I'll speak from the other end for a moment. Obviously, there's a huge ecological issue here because everything has changed in the environment for the kids. And obviously, as you more or less alluded to just in sharing questions, definitely a need for appropriate outlets of that energy earlier in the school day. And I always recommend, listen, I understand how hard it is right now for teachers who are trying to manage kids online, kids at home, trying to adapt their lesson plans to fit both formats. So it's almost impossible. So the simplest, easiest tip I would say is whoever's in that position, whoever's teaching, especially those younger kids, let's get back to using timers in short increments and have some quick brain breaks, some quick stand up and do, some quick energy releases throughout the day. Now, I was on actually recording one of our podcasts this morning, and Kira Anderson, who's an occupational therapist, was talking about this idea of some kids needing this sensory outlet that as specific as things like putting a big bag of books that kids pull across the room, literally just to feel this weight and release this certain type of energy. So I will start out by saying, let's look for some of the low-hanging fruit. Let's look for some simple things that we already do, but maybe structure our time a little differently so that we can get that movement in and even think one step further and more purposefully about that, what that movement might be.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would, from the behavioral side, I'll bring that in. I think that there's a couple of ways to engage learners, and I think part of the wiggles and the energy getting that out is part. But I also think that in times like this, the kind of cognitive engagement's also real critical throughout the end. I know that when I've worked in and watched, the end of the day is when everybody starts to get more lax, a little bit more tired, and so we see all these things show up. And one of the ways that probably anytime anybody asks me, what could be better at school, we've got the good behavior game that pits learners against their own record kind of a situation in a way that they set up rules and it's group contingencies. And I think you could use a lot of that to help mitigate some of the, out of controlness that starts to, what I tend to see is it snowballs. If it doesn't stop fast, you get more and more of it. And if, on the other hand, you could, so if you were to bring in some of the other suggestions on here's some of the activities, pulling the books or whatnot, and then on top of that, adding in some contingencies where they're competing against themselves on ways to manage that, I would expect fewer referrals out for disciplinary issues or asking people to come in and stop because they're crazy. So that would be my first thought is kind of looping everyone into what's the behavior here.
I think that's an excellent model, the good behavior game, because you can set up very specific expectations. Students can practice it. But I think it's really important, as Dr. Hines said, to just program in activities throughout the day and have that, have reasonable times, reasonable expectations for when you're required to stay seated in your social distancing, and then have other opportunities to get up and move around, which it could be movement to a song, it could be taking turns with Simon Says, activities like that. And some schools are allowing students to go out to playgrounds. And if you have a particularly difficult classroom, which most classrooms are challenged in the afternoons with activity levels, that's been the case even before the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
If you have a chance, if you could talk to the administration and ask for your recess time to be scheduled in the afternoon, that might help as well. Just go ahead and program that so there is some activity in there. I think being proactive is going to be critical regardless of what area you're targeting with behavior management.
Mhm. I can say too, it's probably not just a kindergarten, first grade problem. I was a middle school teacher and a high school teacher, and I remember after lunchtime, boy, things got really busy.
Yeah.
Let's take that same concept and talk about online. How can teachers manage classroom disruptions during online learning?
I think definitely using that same model of breaking up the time and making sure that you're not spending a lot of time lecture style teaching, and making sure that the learning's cooperative, kind of using that same model and giving students that amount of time to kind of take breaks, to stretch, or what have you in the midst of delivering the content. And then also in those times that you are seeing the students in that online space, making it more of application based and discussion based, especially for the older students, is important.
And when we're breaking up the time, I also recommend having a visible countdown timer of some sort, so that the child knows, okay, in 3, you know what, I only have to let 3 more minutes of this, and at least I can. So psychologically, there is something, time can be a motivator.
Sure.
So being really intentional about how we display time in some way, shape, or form, and countdown timers are good, because then I can see how much time I have left versus just a clock, because maybe I'm a lower functioning student and I don't understand a clock, but I can understand at least the concept of when it gets to 0, I get to play. So, I think,
Thank you.
so I think that idea of being really purposeful and intentional, and it looks like one of us may have a tool we can recommend.
Nice display. I think in response to disruptions as they happen, if you are able to kind of smoothly address it with humor and move on so that it doesn't end up taking the attention away from what you're doing, and you can kind of continue with maintaining attention. And that happens across all age groups, even in higher education. We've had some interesting things happen with college students online as well, and different things that you hear when they don't realize they're not muted. So reminding people about muting to minimize distractions and things like that are helpful. Practicing that. If it's an environment that's shitty and distracting to others, teaching them how to use the virtual backgrounds, which I wasn't able to do because I don't have a green screen for tonight. I wish I had. I was trying, but if you have an opportunity to teach them how to do that, that can be very helpful at just minimizing things that you see in the background.
I know that engagement, right, is key to minimizing classroom disruptions. And you all have already talked about some strategies such as, breaking up time, having visible classroom timers, breathing breaks. We know that engagement is cognitive, it's emotional, it's behavioral. So do you have any other strategies to keep students actively engaged during those scheduled class times?
I can speak to that a little bit. My school uses something called Nearpod, which has like amazing, like a variety of ways to engage the students. So I have found that to be critical in engaging students, taking a quick poll, taking a quick true or false gauge of what they think of the material, setting up competitions like you talked about. So using a platform that's student friendly and has many options for you to engage them has been really critical for me to have some success in this, whatever we're calling this.
Those of you who've used Nearpod before, what age groups have you used it with?
So I have it with fifth graders, and I know that the middle schools in my district use it extensively. So I'm not sure what else beyond that.
I've used Kahoots, which may be similar. I'm unfamiliar. I mean, I just Googled Nearpod. I'm looking at it, but I've used Kahoots in a way that it's got leaderboards that you can do a lot of check-ins. And I've taught grad students that have difficulty staying engaged, as well as we pivoted our special ed with severe behavior disorders to online over the summer. And to me, the biggest thing was connecting with the learner frequently would help me suss out barriers pretty quickly in terms of if I'm talking too much instead of letting them learn, and getting out of the way of that was critical. The other thing I always want to let everyone that's not done teaching, pivoting to online is not the same as just turning the camera on and going. It's a tremendous amount of work to do it right. And so while we're able to spin out these ideas, I also want folks to, hold themselves with care on like, that's not easy. And if you're doing both, it's twice as, maybe 3 times as hard. It's not just a matter of 2 things. And so giving some compassion on when you try something that doesn't work so well, not just saying, oh, this online stuff, keep experimenting. I don't think we know yet. And I think that's the silver lining of this is I think we're learning a lot of ways that are going to give us tools to reach underprivileged people that may not be able to access some higher ed that we now can say, hey, this is a really good way to do that. So we've been experimenting a lot with direct instruction. Choral responding with lags and latencies is trickier. Our signals were funky. There's ways now to augment some of that. So I think that's been exciting. But yeah, Kahoot was my go-to because I had played with it before in some capacity. I forgot why I knew about it. I was like, this will solve some of my problems.
I think in a slightly different direction, and Josh, I think those are all good ideas, and Kara, those are things that I would also recommend for sure. But in a little different direction, just to really break it up. Sometimes when you think about, especially in this online platform, you have to think about what do they do on television? Like, honestly, what do they do to engage an audience? And so sometimes I think back, because I'm older, you guys, I think back to things like the David Letterman show. I think about these shows that, have these little quick segments. And so one of the things that one of the agencies and schools that I was working with during the first emergency COVID shutdown, and we were doing a live stream all day long for kids with significant disabilities, and we did it in 15-minute segments. And there were real world segments. There's somebody going for walks. There's anything anybody wanted to do, you could be on our show. But one of the things that was our go-to when we didn't have something was the puppy cam. So somebody who had puppies, it was like we would cut to the puppy cam. Let me tell you, people snap too to those puppies. So, even as a teacher, if you thought about what do I have, even if you set a camera like a little turtle, whatever you have, But kids they love to see the class pet. If they're at home, that's a shared experience. Oh, here's this little thing that we all care about, or that we all watch, or that we all love. If I'm a teacher and I have a pet at home, I'm like, hey, somebody put a camera on the dog bowl. I'll cut to it and say, let's see what Grover's eating right now, and you cut to that camera. So I think there's room for creativity, and I think there's room to do some of these things that are less expected, because we also know that unscheduled reinforcement actually increases behavior. So if I'm expecting it always, if it's like, okay, at this time we'll cut to this, well, then I know I cannot pay attention until then. But if I keep leaving my seat to go do something else and I'm not sitting watching the teacher, but she cuts to that puppy cam and I miss it, I'm like, dang, I missed the puppy cam. So I might want to stay in my seat just in case.
That sounds incredibly fun. So we know that how important relationships are, right, to student well-being. How can teachers build positive relationships with their students online?
I can give an example of a fourth grade teacher. My husband teaches fourth grade math and science, and he gets to school very early in the morning, and he starts his day by having private chats with kids that go ahead and log in. And he'll ask them, how was your weekend? What did you do? And he gives them individualized attention and interaction. And he learns a lot about their interests that way. He can kind of gauge, some of their conversations or some of the instruction based on interests that they've expressed. And he has really, it's a target of his to build strong relationships with all of his students. He's standing in his classroom, but his students are all at home attending remote. So it's an interesting dynamic, but he connects with them every day and spends a little time with them, pays attention to what they initiate and what they bring up. They're experiencing some difficult situations, and some of them are just excited because, they got this new game that they were able to download and they want to tell them about it. So
I'm sure that also opens the door to communication for students who might be a little bit apprehensive to speak up in the full class settings. That's awesome. Anyone else?
I've done similar with the online, where it's kind of delves into what we just discussed about breaking things up. I think one thing I think it was a really good point, that it's easy to sit here and say, okay, I'm gonna plow through my material. I got a lesson I got to get through, and now there's no disruption. There's just a screen, and so I can really push through it. If we're not careful, that shows up. If we have these random, from the user's perspective, breaks where we pivot from, we're talking about fractions, and now, hey, let's just at 1 minute show me something cool that you want to talk about. I had kids that were on iPads, would run around the house. There's some risk there, you gotta be careful, but they'd run around the house, they'd show their dog, or they would show something in their room that they wanted to talk about. And I think there was a lot of connection, both with us and with each other, that prior wasn't. We were working on a lot of social skills too. And one thing that Zoom allowed was I could private message people with prompts like, hey, what if you ask more about that? And let them kind of encounter a sort of bug in the air without the vocal component, just text. But that was pretty helpful. So I feel like I'm in the boat right now. Like, everybody should give themselves a little bit of a break of don't try to get through so much, because if you do at low quality, it is silly. You can break it up, do new things, and then I think there's a lot of opportunity for kind of new interactions that can be cool within the parameters that there's risk in Zoom, and houses can have weird things that show up. You got to be careful about that. But that's been one of the things that we've done that we've actually gone back in person with some of the learners, and they're still talking about, hey, remember when you showed me your X, and we were talking about those things. So, I mean, there's some evidence that there was connection there beyond, me thinking, oh, that seemed to work. They were bringing it up later.
I think we have to get out of our head a little bit too, in terms of our camera work and some of those things. So, like, the way we're all displayed right now, that's great because that's really functional for what we're doing.
Right.
But it's not interesting to watch for, 6 hours. No offense, guys. So, if you're not simultaneously teaching face to face, or even if you are, you might think about how you could change your camera angles at different times, how you can sit and look into it and let the kids in the classroom see you on the smartboard, so that everybody's having the same experience for a minute. And then maybe it's a long distance shot. And, some of the best stuff that we did was people on their phones and, crawling on the floor to find something, and everybody can see it as though they're the one crawling on the floor to find this thing. So I do encourage everybody to, whatever your comfort level is, to start adding some of those layers, because this is a different medium. So we have to change our style and our instructional structure to a degree to better match the format.
I actually did that when I had the hybrid classroom. I had my computer on a rolling cart, and the hybrid kids rolled all around the room with me wherever I went. I rolled them up to the board when it was time to take notes. So they really liked that. And then I've starting every class with a riddle. So I post a riddle. And as I get myself organized to take attendance and get my materials gathered appropriately, the kids are discussing the riddle and they're typing their guesses to the riddle in the box. And it's really built community, and the kids, they're supporting each other and they're helping each other answer. So something as simple as that has kind of like really built community in my virtual classroom.
Speaking of community, let's talk about collaboration. So a teacher submitted a question saying that students aren't effectively able to collaborate on certain topics because of distractions within their household. And the more outgoing students are dominating the conversations, and the more quiet students are getting lost in the background. So how can elementary teachers engage their online students in collaborative activities?
I can speak to that one also. So I do this strategy called teaming, which is just a strategic way to group students. And some of the ways that I've supported all students is through they're given roles. The roles are defined. And also with sentence stems on how to execute their roles. So that way someone with a lower language skills or just more shy has an idea of how to get into the conversation. So it starts with very short, small activities that are very engaging. Everything is very explicitly given to them as far as roles and sentence stems. And it really just helps. And from there, we're building. I mean, it's not perfect, but we're building from there, and we're getting, longer assignments and more in depth with the content.
Anyone else?
I think that's fantastic. I love the little small breakout rooms where you can kind of group people in smaller groups, because sometimes having a smaller group to work with is less intimidating, or you may not mind the distractions as much. The distractions, again, I think you have to try to minimize when you set them up on the computer, and revisit that occasionally. But also equity sticks. In face-to-face classrooms, we used to use equity sticks where you'd pull out someone's name and kind of randomly call on them. And that way, it's not always the same people answering or speaking out. You can do that online as well. And it's a quick way to have a random selection of students, but giving more equal opportunities for people to speak up and participate. For those who are just really nervous and shy and have a hard time speaking up, I think as the classroom teacher, that's something you can target, and impacting their ability to communicate what they know is going to be valuable through the rest of their academic career and their entire life. So I think that's just as important as any kind of academic that you can teach, that way to kind of express themselves comfortably, making it safe.
So our next educator says kindergarten through third grade e-learners are struggling with navigating step-by-step directions when trying a new app or website without the support of a teacher to simply guide and simplify right beside them as they would in a face-to-face classroom. What are your suggestions in that situation?
I mean, I'll tell you what I would really strongly recommend. Video instructions. And I hate to say that because I know it's extra work for teachers. So it may be that you get your own little in-house production team of kids who can do this. But we know from teaching tons of online courses, doing a screen record, even from a Zoom room, pulling up the exact assignment and talking kids through it in a shortest fashion possible. I'm talking 30-second clips of make sure we do this, 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 start by doing this. Here, I'm going to type my story starter. This is how mine starts. I can't wait to see yours. You know, but something fast and quick, but very, very specific, and not just the teacher or assistant or kids on camera, a screen share so that the exact assignment is showing and somebody's talking them through it.
Mm-hmm.
It has also helped me tremendously to become extremely familiar with whatever that platform is. And that way, if the student is having an issue, I am so familiar with that platform that I can talk them through it and I can help them troubleshoot as well.
I'd also say, in addition to recording and planning to record ahead of time, to recording during instruction too, so that students can go back and revisit, and they not only hear, the teacher's instruction, but what their peers are saying to help enhance some of that they're losing or not understanding.
I think teachers could also utilize screen sharing and kind of go through step by step with screen sharing and then record that at the same time. So you're demonstrating it the way you would be in a classroom, and you're creating your video model at the same time. So if they need to go back and refer to those instructions, they'll have it.
Thank you. I've got another good situation, right?
Oh no.
Here we go. Students are disengaged due to limitations of technology. For example, they aren't completing assignments on time because the organizational tools that are used aren't there. Students are turning off their cameras to avoid communication with their teacher and peers, as well as during tests. What are some strategies to mitigate these issues?
So I think this is a really good time to show how good your instructional design and delivery are. I think that's a failure in that space, frankly, of like, I've not engaged in a way that keeps everyone. That sometimes when I'm physically present, I can manage, I can keep moving through in spite of my instructional limitations. So I feel like that's one thing, again, silver lining, identifying like, wow, I thought that was really good. Clearly not. How can I do that? And that's going to be better in person later if we think about it from that perspective. That's kind of my first thought on that is I'm unsurprised just because I think, and I'm going to, college professors are the worst because we'll stand up front and sage on the stage all day and then go home and feel good about ourselves. And we have learners that are paying and have to work really hard. So they'll learn in spite of maybe failure to design, a good engagement. Youngsters don't have that motivation. And so I think that really makes us have to think about how to do that. And then doing through this medium, really titrates it down to like, this is really a critical active ingredient that we missed and we got to put it in. I've failed more than been successful, but some successes I've seen around that have been looking at, again, like I think that we kind of, everything we've talked about, bringing that together, breaking things up into small bits, and then putting, from a behavioral perspective, we're always going to talk about what contingencies, why would they, engage in any of these things that we want them to do? What's the payoff? And we can't do certain things like if you do this, recess happens because they can shut the laptop and run out. Can't change anything. But I can say, look at my puppy that you can't see otherwise. And that's something that when we all have completed this, we're going to look at the puppy. And so I think that's going to be the thinking about that, thinking about what is available in the online collective. So like I see 5 people that maybe I want to engage with, that's how I can capture it. If you do this, then we'll all get to do a thing we all like. That would be the way I'd start trying to frame those thoughts in terms of contingencies. And the other is removing barriers, I think is going to be really critical. Then we've talked a little bit about how to remove some of the barriers. But yeah, I think this gives us a really clear picture into what's active and what's not in our learning technology right now, which is exciting to me. And I can imagine very frustrating to everyone else. But that's, to me, I'm like, well, this is something I thought was very workable. And now that the learner can close the laptop, I've discovered I was wrong. And so it's helped sharpen that relief for me.
This might also be a good time to add some of those layers of universal design for learning that we've heard about and we've learned about, et cetera, but we haven't necessarily had a chance to weave in this new world. So, for example, if you have a student who is not engaging, on screen, it may be, okay, for the next 15 minutes, we're going to learn how to do X, Y, or Z. You can stay and do this online with me, or you can come ready to show me your finished project in 15 minutes. So if that kid wants to go crawl around the floor, pick up stuff and glue macaroni on a paper, if that's what I'm going to be doing myself, and they want to do it independently and do it in a different way, but as long as the goal of the assignment is met, the student would receive credit. I think it's a good chance to start thinking about that. Or it might be, you can either do this or give me a quick, show me an example in your room of a square and a rectangle and a circle, and come back ready to show me what you found. And sometimes, we get so caught up with this idea of everybody having to upload stuff. You know what? Do it on a phone and just show me a picture. I don't care. I just want to see that you got the idea, kid. So, this idea of being a little fast and fluent in, kind of reaching out to these kids who aren't engaged and thinking of some other layers we could add to the actual assignment and the way that we give the assignment and the way that we assess the assignment.
I'd also add to that and say that just because the student doesn't have their camera on doesn't mean that they aren't engaged. They may be, and for whatever reason, having their camera off at that moment of time. So make sure to consider that too.
Great point.
Brought that up. I was going to ask how you all as a panel felt about students having their cameras on or off. It's been such a debate.
I mean, it's a lot more engaging when cameras are on, I'll say, from my own classes. I usually, in college classes, there are times when they're on and times when they're off. And I'll say, everybody, cameras on. They're, lights up, let's see ya. And then there's other times when it's okay if I'm just delivering content and I don't actually want them looking at everybody else, I'll say, lights down, cameras down, whatever. And it's with the expectation that they'll listen. Of course, these are those adorable little, 20-year-olds. So it's a little bit different than the K-12 kids.
Right.
I've actually chewed on this quite a bit in terms of, I think there are a lot of people who having cameras on is they aren't advantaged in a way that's a sustainable thing for a class period that we've got to be, I think, very cognizant of. My rule of thumb with almost any question about, like, is this blanket thing good or bad, or should we do it or not, will always be, how's it tied to the outcome of the learning outcome in this case? So for me, and I've gotten past it now, I can sit and drone all by myself for hours on end. And pretend there's people listening and smiling and they like what I'm saying. But when I first started the game was I wanted to see the faces because it was hard to engage without seeing reactions. So I think if that's our goal, and I think thinking about why do I want the cameras on, if it's because I need that feedback to know, and it might be helpful. Am I saying, again, depending on the level of the learner, is this landing? Are they understanding? But there's other ways to check in on that. I think on the front side, having a way for somebody to very safely say, I can't have my camera on for this reason, and then start working with them. That builds, again, kind of that connection, a troubleshooting of like, okay, well, how could we get the same outcomes? And sharing too, I'm worried maybe you won't feel as connected to your classmates. What about that? And talking about, because I think there's a variety of reasons cameras are nice. If they weren't, we wouldn't have them. We'd all just be on audio right now. But we like to look at each other. I like to say, like, here's what I'm saying. What are my other panelists? They seem okay. They're nodding. I haven't gone off track. That's a pretty typical thing that I think is valuable. And I think we're in a time where there are people that are not able to have that. Their internet connection might not have the bandwidth. That's problematic if they're trying to push that. They're having the only quiet place is a closet, and they are embarrassed by what's back there. And I mean, I think all those things should be brought into the equation. And cameras, when we think about it, we should say, what's the outcome we need the camera for? And as we said in the last question, what are creative options around that so that we don't have to say everybody has to be like this? It's kind of, that's what I've arrived at after thinking about it for quite a bit and arguing with a bunch of people.
I'd like to add to, I think what Dr. Hines said about the UDL options. I think we should start with a lesson just planning on technology failing, right? If a student can't get connected, what do? So we set things up for them so that they can, complete an assignment or demonstrate the outcome that we're looking for. And as Dr. Hines said as well, take a picture of it on your phone and email it, or, have someone take a picture of the product or something and send it in. But if we plan a variety of ways, we can also provide choices for our students. So if somebody doesn't want to have the camera on, perhaps they could have an alternative option. You could do it this way, or this way. Again, just making sure that you're demonstrating so we have some kind of formative assessment that, yes, we are gaining these skills.
So a key component of our topic tonight, behavior management, is classroom expectations. So the question is, how do you set up those expectations, your procedures in an online classroom setting? And then how often do you refer to it to reinforce the behavior that you desire to see?
All the time. I set expectations, remind of expectations, reinforce expectations being met, prompt back to the expectation. I do that all the time with all the people I work with too, not just my listeners. Like, this is what I expect. And is it happening? Great. If it's not, like, let's revisit and understand. So that's mine always, every day.
I think with creating the classroom expectations, the behavior game is a really good example because you can start with having the children participate and design what kind of learning environment do we want. So they're helping with the structure of the rules and basically what the expectations are, and then having, kind of visuals to go along with those expectations that you can refer to frequently. And basically, as Josh said, you're referring back to those expectations every time you catch good. You catch them meeting the expectations and you let them know consistently. And I think that's a good way to arrange it.
And Kelly mentioned, Dr. Schaefer mentioned the idea of having visuals. An easy add-on is to literally have, paddles of a few key rules that as the teacher you can hold up, because sometimes when we say things verbally, now we've taken everybody's attention, away from your content. So I might say, Deshawn, sit still. Now everybody's thinking about her sitting still instead of the math I was just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
If I have, a system, where I hold up a paddle, that means, my yellow paddle, whatever, and that means, hey, we're getting loud. Whatever I can do to non-verbally cue, just like I would in a face-to-face classroom, I would recommend looking for some creative ways to do that even from home. And, whatever thing you design, and also inviting kids to create their own type of nonverbal communication like that. So, if Kelly finds that she's getting distracted by the noise, she can hold up her yellow paddle from home so everybody will be aware she needs things to settle down because she can't hear.
Love that idea.
And I do get very easily distracted.
Well, you're welcome. We'll start using that with you, Dr. Schaefer.
I've seen, teachers stating expectations, as you're getting ready to start an activity or exercise, reminding of the expectations and pointing to the visuals at the same time. And in one case, they're supposed to do choral responding, right? Active student responding, and I'm asking certain questions, and then the whole class is answering. But he gives details about the 3-foot voice, the volume that you would use if you're 3 feet away from someone, to keep people within a reasonable range so it doesn't get too loud, and gives them very clear parameters about where the volume should be. So I think clear expectations are critical. We make a lot of errors when we don't know what clear expectations are, and we learn by getting feedback that was not right. And if we can focus on, yes, that's what I was asking for, you got it right, we're going to get what we're attending to.
And
there's also, you can pop like this and say, like, Kelly, you really did number 1 great. Back. And that gives you, I've done some of that. Or sometimes if people aren't, that might just pop up and I'll sit quietly. And I've found in the online, those situations, I might make it a little fancier than just a Word document, but that's been very helpful for me. I don't know if there's like teacher versus student where you catch them, meeting rule or meeting expectations, and then when I err, that's a point for them. And I've done the same with, like, oh, I see, everybody answered again. That's a point, and I pop up a screen share that's allowed where I might normally have it behind me on a board. And I've seen other teachers do it on an actual board. My writing just so bad, it would be hard.
So as we begin to wrap up, I have, one last question. Based on your areas of expertise, what is something that teachers or even parents who are at home supporting their students' learning can do in regard to behavior management tomorrow?
I would say definitely the first thing to do is to focus on and start the conversation of self-management and self-soothing and whatever language, is applicable to your child or student. So having a very pointed discussion, okay, everybody at home, find one thing that's your favorite thing that's going to help you feel good to have it with you for a moment. It might be a ball, it might be a squish ball. Here's my little stuff. I don't care what it is, but if I have kids, especially younger kids, but even with older kids, it might be go get your cup of tea, go get something. But that idea of making everybody feel a little more comfortable wherever they are. So if I have kids at home, but also kids at school, we use push balls, we use stuff like that with kids all the time for stress relief, etc. But having those conversations. And inviting the people at home and inviting people in class to find one comfy thing to have with them while they're working, that might be a step in just kind of making things feel better.
I'd say also having some sort of routine so that, as it models the school space, they have that at home as well so that they know what to expect from day to day, and even having it visually for their child is important to have that structure, because when you're at home, you're relaxed much more than you would if you were in the classroom. So having a routine set is important. Will be that piece of advice that I give.
Thank you.
I think it's important to find the child's strength, or, if you're their parent, you probably know what some of their strengths are, but you can, let them know what they're doing well, and let them know that it's a safe place to try. so that they're active learners and they're willing learners and they participate. I think just encouraging, letting them know what they do well, and making sure that teachers, as a parent, making sure that teachers know how much we support them in a really, really difficult time, and that perfection is not a reasonable expectation, even when things are 100% perfect, which doesn't ever happen. We learn as we go, and if we are comfortable trying different things, we're going to learn a lot better. So if we teach our children that, make them feel safe and make them comfortable just trying, let them know what they do well so they're not afraid to try.
Yeah, I'd piggyback on that with setting expectations. I think is critical, and that doesn't mean here are the rules. It means this is what is about to happen, and we're all I've talked to some of my learners. We're kind of on a spaceship doing this stuff that nobody's ever done before, and so I'm gonna mess up. You're gonna mess up, and we've got to hold some space for that and not worry. And here's how that'll work. And setting some rule, like when there's goof ups, we can take a moment, think about it. We can work on something else. And I think that's really critical right now, is holding our own mistakes lightly, because we're going to have them. It's a really hard time. Holding space for the learners to also feel comfortable, as Dr. Schaefer said, is, it's okay. Let's try it and see what happens. And then also saying, and it's kind of a fun adventure, this crazy thing that we're doing right now, can help with mitigate some of the nerves, especially for high performers that are used to, they know what school is about. They come in, they do well in school, and now all that's kind of out the window. They're probably going to really struggle with when they don't know what to do. They don't have the person to go ask because everything. So I think that's an important thing is it's going to be crazy. It's going to be okay because we're all here. Here's how we're going to navigate that.
Mm-hmm. Kara, wrap us up. What's our for tomorrow?
I think keeping an open line of communication with parents is critical during this time. I would encourage parents to ask questions of the teacher. Sometimes teachers don't know what the parents don't know. So just making sure that your lines of communication with the parents are open. They know things that are due. They know things that might be missing. And just to ask questions and be open to communication outside of school hours even, it can be really helpful.
That's very true. Well, I want to end with thank you. Thank you to our panelists for lending us your time and expertise this evening. And thank you all, our viewers, for watching, for participating, for submitting questions. If we were not able to address your question, please send it to tjeei@ucf.edu, and we'll do our best to find an answer for you. And also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and feel free to ask questions there. Join us next week for another live Q&A session where our topic is going to be social and emotional learning in an online environment. Thank you all and have a great evening.
Thank you, Dr. Chapman.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.